We've got a Tamara Lich trial and Chris Barber trial update, and a lot more. There's a whole bunch more. We're going to be starting in Israel, but it's a lot smaller than it has been the last couple of days. And first, we'll start with a meme, because I like memes. Wall Street Silver, who's a big American poster, right? And he's got, 1 million followers, 1 million people. And he's making fun of Justin Trudeau. He says, clown world. We're afraid of American authoritarianism, says Justin Trudeau. Freezes people's bank accounts for protesting. Yes, that American authoritarianism pales in comparison to Canada's authoritarianism. So we shouldn't be afraid of the Americans. We should be afraid of our own government. Let's start in Israel. And the past couple of days, I've been giving context about who possibly benefits from all of these conflicts. And it doesn't seem like Palestine or Gaza or Hamas benefits from any of the actions that they've done in the last couple of days. But it certainly seems like Mr. Netanyahu benefits from it. Here is Inversionum. I'm getting that wrong. He says, just a few months ago, Israeli citizens were protesting Netanyahu and his judiciary reform power grab, with many Israeli citizens saying they were creating a dictatorship and that his establishment was corrupt. Large majority of Israeli people were against him. There were even protests scheduled on the same day of the attack from Hamas. Now, all that will be forgotten, along with Netanyahu getting exactly as he wanted, with the new emergency unified government retaining his power, getting judicial control, and much, much more. The Israeli people seem to have forgotten he made their country a lab rat for Pfizer as well. If you're about to lose power and your people are en masse protesting you for your corruption, just start a war and everyone will forget about it immediately and still unify behind you. Oldest trick in the book. Here is ABC News just going over what's going on with Netanyahu going back in time. This is a more robust news show than I showed yesterday, but here we go. We'll just have a quick look.
Turmoil in Israel, fiery protests erupting in the streets tonight. This comes just hours after embattled Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu dismissed his defense minister. That cabinet member said he would not support Netanyahu's attempts to take power from the judiciary. The battle over Netanyahu's plans is now intensifying. Here's ABC's Patrick Reevell.
Israeli cities tonight erupting in protest after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sacked his defense minister today, the country's political turmoil rapidly deepening. Netanyahu removing Yoav Gallant, a member of his own Likud party, after Gallant called for a pause in the government's controversial plan to weaken Israel's judiciary, essentially stripping its power to have final say on Israel's laws. The plan triggering weeks of massive protests. An estimated 300,000 citizens marching Saturday, many alleging the plan is a power grab that could make Israel an autocracy more like Turkey or Russia.
We all have to fight for our rights because of the plans of Benjamin Netanyahu that want to turn this nation into a dictatorship.
The unprecedented anger spreading to Israel's...
Okay, so people are angry. This is not that long ago. And like I showed you yesterday, this changes the whole thing. CTV Kitchener says, Israel ground offensive in Gaza, pretty close. Netanyahu advisor says, click on the image below to read more. The other day I reported they delayed it because of some clouds on Saturday, right? Looks like the clouds have cleared up and the ground invasion's back on. Here is Holly Doan. She says $191,000 a year federal advisor on Islamophobia has avoided public events since October 7th attack on Israel. The Amira Al-Gawabi wrote in 2021 Toronto Star column that MPs should call out Israel's actions, not only Hamas's rockets. So it's interesting, her silence on all of that. And I think that we shouldn't have people whose sole job in the government, funded by the government to the tune of nearly $200,000, is to struggle people on how they refer to other people. Like, we shouldn't have that at all, period. People should be allowed to express themselves the way they see fit, so long as they're not expressing, we should organize and harm these people. We should harm these people. We should hurt these people. As long as they're not trying to organize any kind of violence or something like that, you should be able to say, what you want to say. Because if you can't name a problem, you can't solve the problem, right? And you can't avail yourself of your stupidity. If you can't say what you think for fear of being, canceled or whatever, you can't learn anything, right? So it's very interesting, very interesting. Marco says, anyone recall when university courses in Russian history and literature were being canceled because Russia invaded Ukraine? Concerts of Russian performers were canceled. Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, Gogol, Gogol, I'm getting that terribly wrong, and Solzhenitsyn, Tchaikovsky, and oh man, this is a nightmare for me. I got a whole bunch of them, and I'm not even going to try this last one. No, I'm not going to try it. Canceled. They're all canceled. But now in Canada, folks celebrate with glee on the streets the savagery and barbarism Hamas perpetrated on innocent Israeli civilians. CUPE, Fred Han, CUPE, and McMaster University applauded. Several members of parliament shield their ineptitude and moral equivalencies. The prime minister has another personal day today. What a culture of absurd extremists we have. So, there's a lot wrong. There's a lot wrong with the response from everybody. Again, terrorism where innocent people were targeted and killed is abhorrent and shouldn't be celebrated by anybody. It's terrible. And then at the same time, having all of these people kind of the division being created with this one event is unparalleled. I've never seen anything like it. People who formerly would agree about things definitely are fractured on this. And it's almost, we were talking about it yesterday on the kitchen table talk, and people were saying they force you to choose one side or the other. Like, by framing it this way, you are forced to one side or the other. If you say, well, Palestine has some legitimate grievances over the past decades, right? Then you're a Jew hater or a Nazi or something to that effect. If you say Israel should defend themselves, then you ignore all the history of Palestine, of the conflict there, and so on and so forth. And it's incredible. It's incredible how this has been a normalizing thing, very divisive, but normalizing of violence, normalizing of, if somebody commits a terrorist attack, yes, of course, your country can go flatten that country. Like, yes, obviously, yes. What? What? The United States invaded Iraq under the similar pretenses, right? So it's a very interesting situation. I think one of the main problems I have is at the beginning of this, they were saying totally unprovoked attack. And it's like, well, that's not, if you don't know the history, that's not accurate at all. However, no innocents deserve the attacks that happened. Those two things are independent and true, right? But it's one of those things where you sit there, and as things come out, as the history is discussed, that history is brushed under the rug because the conflict is the most important thing. Here's another interesting parallel. People are allowed to disrupt roads, have abhorrent views, right? Agree with violence in Palestine against Israel, agree with violence in Israel against Palestine, so on and so forth. They're allowed to have these views, which I guess are not very nice, I suppose, depending on your perspective. But the police aren't bringing out the riot horses. The police aren't arresting these people. They were arresting people who were fighting for freedom against our Canadian government. They're not arresting these people. What's the difference? Is the difference the length of time they were protesting? Why does that make it different, right? If these people stayed for a week or two, would they also be arrested in the same way? Would they be vilified in the same way? I don't know. I don't think so. Trudeau said that he understood why churches were being burned, and he understood the violence. Is this a similar situation, but he doesn't understand the violence created by his own police during the Freedom Convoy? It wasn't the protesters who were creating violence in that situation. Here is Ace of Spades. They say, why isn't the RCMP out on the streets on horses beating and arresting these terrorists and freezing their bank accounts? Canada must clean out the terrorist population. Time to secure the safety of Canada for legitimate Canadians. And Karmaya says, Main Street blocked for march in solidarity with Palestine in Hamilton. So this is not just like Hamilton. There's a lot of places that are doing this. There's Ottawa. I'll come back to this one in a sec. Here's Ottawa. Genocide chants on a loud hailer in Ottawa, like a loudspeaker. The police tasered a parents' rights protester for using a loudspeaker, but the police let genocide and support for a listed terrorist organization, Hamas, go on without any actions. The Charter and Rights and Freedoms and Criminal Code don't mean much anymore. So this is the people who are protesting in support for Gaza and Palestine and Hamas. They're saying this is all the same. So here you go. Okay, so big protest. I just want you to get the idea of how big this protest is. And Linda Frum's talking about Trudeau's MPs are sending out letters citing atrocities and war crimes, which the MPs are alleging have been committed by Israel. No mention of Hamas, a call for Israel to end its siege, but no demand for release of hostages or end of ongoing rocket attacks. This is the Liberal Party's hypocrisy we know so well. Specific messages tailored to specific audiences, everyone told what they want to hear. Right. So not to move on, but here is a similar rally in support of Israel, and it petered out. This one was in Ottawa as well. Rupa says the size of the We Stand with Israel Peace rally in Ottawa pairs in comparison to the pro-Gaza rally, which took place earlier. The latter was not just bigger, but also stayed around longer. The former was gone in the blink of an eye. So here is the Israelis for Peace. Here we go. A lot of people. I don't know. There's not a head count, but the other ones seemed bigger. Here is the Irish Prime Minister, this is from 2014, okay? And he is talking to his Israeli ambassador in Ireland, and he's talking about the situation in Gaza, the Middle East, and what's going on there. This is from 2014, okay? I have to stress this. This is from almost 10 years ago, okay? I'm just going to take the middle of this. The beginning part is interesting. He lived in Gaza, or he lived in Israel or Gaza. I'm not sure which one. I don't know Gaza. He lived there in the 80s, and he articulates that it's an apartheid state. I don't know that that's accurate because, as far as I understand it, there are 2 million Arabs living in Israel right now. So, but he references specifically, the atrocities that are happening in the West Bank and Gaza specifically. Although I don't know how much control Palestinians have in the West Bank anymore. I'm using that term interchangeably just because that's what it is in my head, but I could be incorrect. I don't keep up with the borders there. Apologies. So here is the Irish Prime Minister from 2014, 10 years ago. Here we go. Sorry about the music. The music stops very shortly.
Gaza on 3 separate occasions over recent years, the seizure of Palestinian land and so on, by attacking Hamas. Now, why don't you just admit that Hamas didn't exist when the first Intifada took place? They didn't set up an armed wing until the early 1990s. And that there was a reason that PLO were in Tunis at the time, exiled, effectively not present. But the ordinary Palestinians rose up because you denied them basic rights. I lived there. It was apartheid. It was racism. It was endemic. It was rotten. Absolutely, I was shocked within weeks of living there to see how you treated Palestinian people. And isn't it the fact that the law of return...
I don't know if he lived in the West Bank or in Israel. I don't know what his experience is. So and apologies that I can't give a broader kind of context to what he's saying here. But it's interesting, right? Where in that part did you live? Back to this.
Which is the basic law of the Israeli state, is a racist apartheid law because it confers rights on Jews that it denies to Palestinians. It allows, for example, if I was Jewish and had never stepped foot in Israel, I could claim citizenship there tomorrow, but 6 million people whose origins are in what you now call Israel, who were forced out in 1947 or 48, do not have that right. Isn't that part of the reason why the Palestinians are in dispute with Israelis? Because you deny them the right to return to their homes and to their land and to their villages, and that they have a legitimate claim, even under international law, to return, but you deny them that right. Why do you deny them that right? And why do you give that right to other people who have no connection whatsoever with the land, whether you call it Israel or whether you call it Palestine?
He goes on and as well, and it's interesting. This is not a new conflict. But what I wanted you to see from that part was the right of return, which confers on Jewish people the right to return to Israel, but not on Palestinians to return to land that they historically have a tie with. And in fact, he goes on to say, why doesn't Gaza have an airport? Why aren't they allowed to have free movement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so my friend, I sent him that clip this morning, and he said, well, they're not allowed to have free movement because they're terrorists. And I said, fair enough. However, if you set up those circumstances to breed terrorists and then also fund the terrorists, at what point do you stop that? The right of return is an interesting argument, one that I had not heard before. This guy, I sent my friend this video as well, and this is a Jewish influencer. My friend said he looks like an Antifa guy. He looks like an Antifa dude. He's wearing like a black hoodie and he's got very dark hair. And he is on the side of the Palestinians, I think, and he's Jewish. And he's not on the side of Israel. He says Israel is bad. Now, I'm showing this to you just because I'm trying to give you a fulsome idea of what's going on. And I think that there's a lot more to this conflict than we're being told. I want you to make up your own mind. Like there's a lot more to watch with regards to this that I'm not going to show, and I can't show because it's beyond the scope of today's podcast, because it's not an Israel podcast, it's Canada Poly. But I want my fundamental core is there should be a solution to this problem. Doing what we've done up till now has caused this problem. Our actions have contributed to this problem collectively, and we should stop doing what we're doing because the outcome is not what we want and do something else. That's fundamentally what I want. Stop the killing, figure out a solution that's okay to everybody, and move forward in a way that people are feeling like we're building rather than tearing things down. That's fundamentally what I want. I don't want to support one side or the other because the one side's bad or the other side's bad and blah, blah, blah. We're humans. We're fallible. We're imperfect. And, everybody, if you look back enough, far enough, everybody can claim victimhood. But it's character building. It is a testament to your character to pick yourself up and say, okay, like time to move forward and not use this as a crutch, but work on myself and get better and become better. Anyway, regardless of all of that, regardless of what I want, this is what on the internet, a Jewish person is saying about Israel. So here we go.
You want me to support Israel? My Israel? Fuck no, never, absolutely not. Ew, disgusting. Israel. We talking about the same Israel? My Israel? It's my Israel, by the way. It's mine. I own it. You see, it's my birthright. For those of you who don't know, because I was born a Jewish man, I own the land of Palestine and Israel. It is my fucking blood right. That's not me saying that. That's the state of Israel, by the way. They told me, hey man, because you're technically a Jew, Israel's yours. It's always been yours. Come on down. Come see the homeland. This isn't me being a dick. This is the state of Israel literally saying this to me. If you are a Jewish person, they offer you what's called birthright. Birthright. The opportunity to come to Israel for free on the Israeli dime and see Israel. It's a timeshare pitch. It's a fucking timeshare pitch. They want you to come see the city, dance in Tel Aviv, eat some kebabs, kick some Palestinians out of their homes, and then they'll try and get you to move there. And they'll do it like this pitch, like it's family, it's unity, it's an Israeli homeland. Nah, guys, it's an apartheid state. It's the greatest shame of the Jewish people. It's disgusting. You want me to condemn terrorists? Easy.
Okay, so there you go. And he condemns both Israel and Palestine here, Israel and Hamas here, to be equal. Well, I'll let him say it. Here you go.
I condemn the state of Israel and I condemn Hamas, the terrorist organization supported by the state of Israel. That was fucking easy.
Okay, so it's not as clear cut as it's being sold to us. And that's what I want you to take away. And fundamentally, I don't want any more terrorist stuff because that's terrible. And I feel like the people in charge, if they were working towards a solution, they would be realizing that if you do the same thing and expect a different result, that's crazy town, right? Like, so you should probably do something different. And then you could reasonably argue that we're doing something different this time. It's reasonably going to be a different result. We're expecting a different result because we're doing something different. But who knows, right? Maybe they are doing something different, but the thing they're doing different is horrific, and we'll all be terribly sad when we find out what it is. Ursula von der Leyen says, who's the president of the EU, the leader of the EU? Let's find out. Hold on. President of the EU Commission. She says, there's no justification for Hamas's heinous acts of terror. Israel has the right to defend itself. At the same time, civilians in Gaza are also victims of Hamas. This is why we are tripling our humanitarian aid for Palestinians in need. I don't understand how that works. Canada's doing the same thing, and I don't understand how that works. It seems really kind of strange to ignore the fact that Hamas is the elected and current government in Palestine. If a place lost a war and you have to deal with the fallout of that. How do you deal with that? How do you resettle the losers of the war? Do they get to keep any of their land? Do the winners have any responsibility to the losers? Is the international community, do they have any responsibility to the losers? What exactly should happen here? Is there is there a manual? So you've lost a war, right? Step one, right? Germany, could we find some help? Well, what happened after the First World War set exactly the parameters and circumstances for the Second World War. So when I say we're setting the circumstances for this, it's not, we're practiced at that. We're well practiced at that. The people in charge definitely know how to set the stage for a war 20 years down the line, right? So, right, maybe not. Maybe we'll skip Germany's advice on what to do after you've lost a war. But fundamentally, what are the responsibilities of the international community when something like this happens? So Israel's taken Palestine. What now? What to do next? But what we did after Russia took Ukraine or the Donbass or Crimea, taking all of that, was very different than the international response to this one. So you've won a war and you're Russia. Whoops. Turn to the Appendix B. Oh. Right? So it's one of those situations where it seems like things are different depending on who and where you are and which side of the global cabal you fall, right? Vladimir Putin. Oh, dear Vladimir, we hoped you wouldn't be... Never mind. D.D. Denslow is reminding us of this, and the CIA are all about mind control, et cetera, and controlling the media. The media is a very, very potent tool. Man, I've had some surprising conversations in the last couple of days about Nazis and Israel, and if you seriously hold those views, man, hold on. I think you misunderstood. Anyway, fundamentally, people are ceding the ground to make it totally acceptable for Israel to defend themselves and for a whole bunch of Palestinians to come to the West. That's what I think they're doing, and it's all done through perception and forcing people's how they view things, and that's just perception, how they view things to be those terrible, these people are bad, we can save them, this is how we'll do it. And the answer is right there. You just have to get the politicians on board. Bullshit. The politicians put that cheese in the middle of the maze, and we're the rat running there right now, and the politicians can't wait. Here's the CIA to tell us what the CIA is doing.
There are other functions, however, some of them more legitimate than others. One is to run secret wars. Another thing is to disseminate propaganda to influence people's minds. And this is a major function of the CIA. And unfortunately, of course, it overlaps into the gathering of information. You have contact with a journalist, you will give him true stories, you'll get information from him, you'll also give him false stories. You also work on their human vulnerabilities to recruit them in a classic sense, to make them your agent so that you can control what they do, so you don't have to set them up sort of, by putting one over on them. So you can say, here, plant this one next Tuesday.
Can you do this with responsible reporters?
Yes, the Church Committee brought it out in 1975, and then Woodward and Bernstein put an article in Rolling Stone a couple of years later. 400 journalists cooperating with the CIA, including some of the biggest names in the business, to consciously introduce the stories into the press.
Well, give me a concrete example of how you use the press this way.
Well, for example, in my war, the Angola War that I helped to manage, 1/3 of my staff was propaganda. I had propagandists all over the world, principally in London, Kinshasa, and Zambia. We would take stories which we would write and put them in the Zambia Times, and then pull them out and send them to a journalist on our payroll in Europe. But his cover story, you see, would be that he'd gotten them from his stringer in Lusaka, who had gotten them from the Zambia Times. But after that point, the journalists, Reuters and AFP, the management was not witting of it. Now, our contact man in Europe was, and we pumped just dozens of stories about Cuban atrocities, Cuban rapists. We didn't know of one single atrocity committed by the Cubans. It was pure, raw, false propaganda to create an illusion of communists, eating babies for breakfast.
Eating babies for breakfast, right? Where have you heard stories about babies recently? Jeepers creepers, right? It's all to get you. Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful